Welcome to episode 2 of the BigD Podcast. My name is Mike, and we're going to get to all that. So first, I want to thank everybody who watched the first podcast. It's actually been amazing. Some of the people that have reached out to me, and I'm truly grateful for that. I've had some interesting conversations with people. There's been a few that are called me for what my pastor showed, a piece of shit. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon. But a lot of people have reached out and said, you know what, I really appreciate your honesty, your candor, and what you're trying to do. It's not easy to slit one's throat. I spent a lot of time slitting my throat, a lot of years slitting my throat, and essentially, I put out on LinkedIn, I'm an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic, a liar, a crook, a piece of shit. I'm never going to get a job in my profession again. I know that as well as anybody else, right? Because there's stigmas, there's all kinds of, other things. But, a lot of people have reached out and said, not really sure what all happened. And just want to let you know I'm rooting for you. And that means a lot. Especially some of the people that have reached out. And I appreciate that. This morning when I was talking to my wife, which isn't always easy, it's actually difficult to go through everything that we're going through and all the shit that I put her through and the dishonesty, all that stuff. She made a comment to me, and I must have said this when I was in rehab or after rehab, that I stopped shaving because it was hard to look at myself in the mirror. And I think maybe I'd not shaved for a couple days, and that brought that up. Well, it got me thinking a little bit. And, originally I was going to do this episode on that breaking moment, that moment that you're like, you know what? I got to get help. I got to break down, get help, and stop. But I think there's something way before that, and it's to talk about the job as an alcoholic, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, all those things that go into that. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've had a lot of jobs. And the hardest job I've ever had was being a full-blown attempting to function alcoholic. And, lying became a survival tool. It was a second language to me. It was more than just a reflex. I lied to avoid pain. I lied to avoid the truth. I lied to avoid change. And the worst of it all, toward the end, I lied just to make it through one more day as a drunk. That's all I wanted. One more day. They talk about, after you're in recovery and AA and all these other things, they take it one day at a time. That's how I was. And that's how a lot of people are gripped by addiction and mental illness and drugs, gambling, sex, whatever that can be. You just want to survive another day because the house of cards has fallen, and consequences and medical, legal, all these types of things that could be happening. Basically, you don't wake up and say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to become a complete degenerate, lying piece of shit, but on the outside, I'm going to seem normal and hunky-dory. You morph into that. That's not who you're born with. You're not born the same way. Nobody's comes into the world as a racist, right? It's an inherently learned trait. And, when it gets dangerous is really at that point where lies becomes your oxygen. It's your way to breathe. And then you start thinking to myself, what kind of lies am I telling? They're pointless. And the number one person that you lie to on a consistent basis is yourself. And you can even see right through your own lies, but you don't, because you are so hell-bent on having one more day of that active addiction. And that active addiction can do horrific things to you. I've been in a treatment here for the last 5 months, 40 days residential. I've met a lot of people, and stories, they're all different, but they have one common thing. It's lying, manipulation, all these sorts of things to keep addiction going. I would lie to myself. I mean, here's a guy who had 2 strokes, a kidney failure, and I was convincing everybody else I wasn't drinking. I was convincing myself this had nothing to do with the handle of Tito's that I was putting in my body a day just to live. Waking up in the middle of the night drinking. Hiding booze all over the house. And not just everywhere. Because if I told the truth, it would have to stop. And what did I think would happen? It would all come crashing down, which ironically enough, it does. And, I was already rotting inside, but I figured if I could just on the outside portray this person that I wasn't, and it's amazing, I was easily liked, all those different things. And then there were times I would do things in the last, couple years of my addictions that I thought I would never do. One of my good, who I consider a personal friend, was my boss at one point. And we went to a leadership thing, and I was completely drunk. And I don't even remember telling him to go fuck himself, and I had no reason to do that. And, it's one of those things that stuck with me. It's just, when I was in rehab, like, that was the shit I was doing. And it wasn't good, Lying basically becomes your identity to the point where you're not even the same person that you are. You're running your outlook. And that's what it is. It's an outlook, right? It's never in the present. It's out there, And the best people, and I was fantastic at this, is lying, manipulating, changing the subject, still wanting people to really respect you. And on the inside, you are just hurting worse than you can ever imagine. But you won't address it because, again, you're lying to yourself. And it's not just one drink at a time. I have not the best memory, probably of the last 8 or 9 years. But, there were times where I'm like, this is so bad. So bad. I mean, that's why I was afraid to go through detox, because I thought I was going to die. I was smart enough to know that. But I convinced myself, hell, I even convinced others I wasn't drinking. I could sit and drink a handle of vodka and people wouldn't even know I was drunk. I mean, I go into the emergency room the day that my mom took me in at 0.39. And I was fine, walking, talking, the whole thing. And it was terrible. And I was lying. And I got so good, I was acting in a role. The worst part is the truth when you're in addiction hurts so bad because you have to face what you are and what you've become and what you've done. When I was in post detox and I was in residential, one of the things that happens when you quit drinking is you really have a tough time sleeping. And for me, it wasn't just easily quelled by trazodone, Seroquel, some of the other things. I had significant sleep things, and I'd sit up at night and I'd admit everything to myself. The people I'd hurt, the things I'd done, how much I drank, what did I do to hide it, the times I almost died and didn't tell anyone. I mean, the shit that could have happened and gone wrong is astronomical. And the worst part about it is, you hate yourself more than you love anything else. And that's frightening, because your addiction is taken over. You marginalize your family, you marginalize your career, you marginalize others, and you take advantage and you do things just for the sake of doing them, not that you need to. It just damages you to the point of just complete craziness. And you wonder about how, people in addiction get out of it, and they say, well, you just got to be honest with yourself. I'm still having a tough time with that. I'm still having a tough time putting together the honesty. And did this happen? Is my recollection of how it happened right? Is it the things I've done? Part of me still thinks they're beyond repair. Part of me thinks I just want to keep going with that one more day. And keep going down the path of that feeling of it's not that bad. There's a movie. It's called The Usual Suspects. Great movie, by the way. Kevin Spacey before, all the weirdness. But there's a line in the movie, and I really think that this is about addiction and the people around you and yourself. And basically, I'm quoting it exactly, but they're talking about this thing, Kaiser Soze, and he's like this bad guy, but nobody's ever seen the bad guy. Nobody's ever laid eyes on him, and no one really knows who he is. They've heard stories, all this. Well, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he did not exist. And that's what you do in addiction. That's what I did in addiction. It was out of control. Completely out of control. There was no rhyme or reason. Nothing. But for 4 or 5 hours a day, I could convince people that I was okay, that I was normal. I knew years ago it was beyond control. But you live for that one more day, that one more minute, that one more second, right? The lies are basically your body and your mind's way saying that what you're putting in me is so good and I need it so bad that just go ahead and skate from the rest of the world. Come be honest with us. And I had times where I was like, yeah, man, I'm a really, 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 really bad alcoholic. And, eventually though, the lies, they stop working and everything comes crashing down. And the problem with that is that it doesn't just say, oh, I'm sober, I'm normal. Your body takes forever to heal from it. You still may behave the same way that you did in the past. I mean, I catch myself being an asshole to my family all the time. And what am I doing? Because I'm still coming to grips with the honesty internally with myself. And those are brutal things. I mean, to the normal world that addiction hasn't touched, oh, he went to rehab, he's fine. Right? Or you think that defines that person. Addiction. And like I said, in the last podcast, nobody wakes up and wants to be an addict. No one wakes up and wants to be an alcoholic. Those things are just, they're taught. And your body becomes allergic to the drug. But unlike poison ivy, when you itch it, it feels better, not worse. And that was the downfall, And then you get to the healing part. What does the healing part really look like? Sorry. What is a moment? There's always this moment. It may be big and maybe not. I've sat at a lot of tables, been to a lot of AA meetings, IOPs, and residential where people have this. They call it an epiphany, maybe, but the number one thing that people have said that it worked for them is that the line didn't work anymore because I didn't believe the lies. The line didn't work anymore because I didn't believe the lies. And that takes a very long time to get over. I'm not over it. Part of me will never get over it. Right? But I want to move on. I want to help others because there are others out there. It's interesting that, when it comes to addiction, I find myself in places, and even when I was in active addiction, I could be like, yeah, that guy's an alcoholic. He's an alcoholic. Right? You can spot him. I mean, it's like somebody in the military. If you say you were in the military and you weren't, they're going to know. But they're also going to know by the way you behave and how you are that, yeah, this guy's probably somebody that served. But when you're lying, you're basically like that bullshit Navy SEAL who tells the local Legion that he's a Navy SEAL, combat, and, all these types of things. You got all these lies going, and you're still willing to sit down with a guy like Don Shipley, the guy that outsold the fake, phony SEALs, and you're willing to sit down with him and still try to convince him. But more importantly, you're sitting there telling yourself, knowing this is only a matter of time. That's how strong the addiction is. I would have loved to have said, that there's this moment that breaks you, and it doesn't. Because the next thing you think is a lie. No, I'll have another drink, I'll quit. I don't want to quit because if I quit, I'm going to go into withdrawals. Everyone's going to know, the whole thing. And for what? For one more day of drinking? One more day of using drugs? Because that day could be your last. And, I've seen it. I've seen people who I went to residential with, check on them, and they've relapsed. And they're in bad ways. And guess what? I'm in recovery, and I'm in a bad way. That's how screwed up the whole thing is. Shame is really, really loud. And, because we're afraid, people won't love the truth. We don't want to admit it, even to ourselves. We've lost control. Because once we say it out loud, it becomes real. Once you admit all of it, it becomes real. Maybe not completely. I mean, for me, I lied for better part of a year and a half. I mean, Jesus, I was drinking vodka at dialysis. For God's sakes. I was telling doctors I wasn't drinking. I mean, what are we thinking? And once it's real, and once we know something's got to change, and that change is petrifying. It is petrifying. It is absolutely petrifying. And they say that it's always darkest right before dawn. A lot of that is true. That's very true when it comes to, at least in my experience, when it comes to, what that is. Trying to make a comeback, trying to be honest, trying to do these things, I lied because I didn't want people to worry. I lied because I didn't want to be that guy. I lied because it was easier being vulnerable. I lied because I couldn't imagine who I was without alcohol. That's all I thought about. And the things and it turns out, I was with all that somebody worth knowing, but I lost sight of it, in the haze. And to get back to my wife, telling me, well, you should talk about not looking at yourself in the mirror. You don't look at yourself in the mirror. I remember being on business trips and shaving without looking in the mirror because I was so just ashamed of my life, what it become, the things I was doing, the trust and hope that people had in me, that I was betraying. And then it got quiet right before I hit rock bottom. I stopped thinking like that. I stopped caring. There are other times I stopped caring. Sitting on a bridge in Greensboro, North Carolina. There are a bunch of times I thought about over drinking, overdoing everything. Would all the world be better off without me in it? And the shame in what I'm about to say is probably the hardest thing. It's not that I didn't want to, it's because I was too afraid. I was too big of a pussy to do it. And that's honesty. That's when you hurt so bad that you just want to keep going to keep feeling something. And the feel is hurt and fear and a million other emotions. So what have I thought could change when I stop my active addiction? It's amazing because people say, God, the world gets so much better. You feel so much better. I had some of the worst times that you could ever imagine in inpatient rehab. Sitting there. How did I get here? I knew how I got there. I knew. But I still was lying to myself. How did I get here? Man, I don't need to be here. I could walk out. I could walk out the door. You know? I could do all those things. But I finally quit. I couldn't do it anymore. This job of being an alcoholic was so draining. 7 days a week. Nights, weekends. It would not stop. Things made it worse. About every relationship I have. I down to very few friends. But it's better than it was. It's better than the pain. I used to not go downstairs in my house because I couldn't walk up the stairs. They seemed like Everest. I remember sitting, we got kind of a ranch and the stairs that go like this. And I remember sitting, we must have been watching a show or something down there and I just sat there. And it was my life, man. Those 6 stairs felt like Everest. And coming out of D-Tox, when I was going to residential, that's what it felt like. I continued to feel like that. In many ways, I do still feel like that. But it's not dying. That I do know. That I do know. Slowly after you stop drinking, emotions get really, really bad. Because your body's in fight or flight. It's like, what are you doing? Where's my alcohol? Where's my dopamine? You know, it's unbelievable how your body behaves. For me, you know, I talked about it last night. I molted. All my skin fell off. It was crazy. Right? I gained weight. I was eating sugar like crazy. I was eating Jolly Ranchers. Hundreds of them. Trying to replace the dopamine from the alcohol. And during this time, your brain is so confused. So confused to the point I'd be in a really good mood 1 minute and just be a disaster the next. It got so bad. And then you become this person whose new identity is you're in rehab and you start feeling, oh, this is a safe place for me. You know, I was 30 days. I probably wasn't ready to come home in 30 days, but you know, rehab is having a really hard family relationship. My wife was doing everything, God bless her, and I could not say the right thing. I could not empathize with the fact that the past year and a half happened. Her husband's in rehab, sober. I cannot empathize that. I'm learning to empathize. You know how crazy that sounds to say that out loud? You think you'd be like, shit, this guy should be like kissing everybody's fucking ass. But you're so messed up. And it's difficult to start rebuilding those relationships. And I'm terrible at it. You know, there was a skit one time with Bill Cosby. And Bill used to talk about alcoholics. And he'd say, you know, people talk about, you know, alcohol makes me, you know, my real personality come out. You know, I feel good, I feel great. And there's one little problem with that. What if you're an asshole? 27 years of pretty hard drinking turned what was left of me into an asshole. And I'm trying really hard to change that. I'm trying really hard to be positive, to laugh, to see the good in this situation, to see the good in anything. But it's hard. 5 months in, it's hard. It's hard knowing everything you were is gone. Your work identity gone. Your interpersonal relationships gone. I can't even tell you over the years how many friends stopped hanging out with us because of my drinking. Some of which, in all fairness, thank God. But others, I really enjoyed those people and really regretted and regret that. I regret a lot of things, but in the end, what started all of it and the exhausting part of it was the lying and the full-time job of being an alcoholic. Unreal. It is an unreal experience. And even when you're done, you don't know how you're going to get out of it. Is this what I'm going to be the rest of my life? Is this how I'm going to feel? Is this how I'm going to behave? It's not dying. That I know. And I know it's nowhere near how bad it was when I was actively drinking. But I'm going to do everything that I can to push through, to continue to try to make an impact, on others. Because I'm going to talk about this in every podcast. There's people out there that are alive, that are in their active addictions. I see them, and they're thinking, what should I do? Should I quit? Should I quit telling lies? How do I tell people that my life's better when I'm sitting here having a conversation with myself in a room, almost convincing myself that it's better, it's a lot better, but it's still really hard. And, I've been blessed with a couple things. Number one, with the family that's supportive. Number two, and people are like, you really think that's a blessing? I got cirrhosis. And that medical, you are going to die if you drink again, that is a real good reason not to drink. That is a really good reason not to drink. I hate to say it, but I'm thankful for that I won't go back to it. So on our next episode, we're going to talk about what my plan was for this episode, and what that is going to be your emotion, your breaking point, right? When you break down and you say, you know what, I need help. How do you start internally looking at yourself? How do you come to grips with looking at yourself? And what are the things you can do to help in that short-term period when you first stop drinking? Over the next couple weeks, we're going to have a couple guests on. I've talked to a few people within the recovery industry who have said they'd like to come on. One of them is just absolutely fantastic. One of the best, greatest, kindest people you'll ever want to meet in your life. So we'll make sure we get him on soon. But to that person still out there suffering, the truth will feel like fire at first. It's going to feel like fire, but eventually it feels like freedom. And when you're tired of lying, and I get that, first you got to stop lying to yourself. And that's the hardest thing. Because once you start doing that, the rest of the pieces, they're not going to be perfect. But they're not going to be the tsunami of doom that you think it is. So we'll look forward to seeing everybody next time. Again, thank you so much for all the kind comments. People that have sent me unkind things. I appreciate that too, because if nothing else, feedback is a gift, and it helps you grow. But what other people think of you is none of your business. So there's that, and also I want to end every podcast with the be frickin' nice. You don't know the devil that's dancing with the person that you see that looks normal, or the person that's in pain. You can't put yourself in any, they say put yourself in other people's shoes. You can't. Truly, you can't. But thank you for tuning into the Big D podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for all the nice comments. Remember to subscribe, tell your friends, like, share, all those great things, and we'll continue the conversation on our next episode. Bye for now.